Shannon Flynn has built a prolific career directing iconic television series like Sesame Street and Hannah Montana. When she details how she has been able to withstand the rugged climb in Hollywood and the entertainment industry, her genuine humility and fierce ambition to succeed shine through. Her recipe for success? It's simple. Stand up for what you know is right and create an environment that is safe and collaborative. Shannon reminds us that if you want to be an A-OK leader, you have to be strong enough to allow everyone to bring everything they have to the table for consideration so that people feel heard. And then you, as the leader, have to do what feels right to you and trust your instincts. Hello, and welcome to another installment of At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a platform where we will learn from people who come from different walks of life, careers, and experiences, but all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of saying yes to the unexpected turns of their lives. And they're now using the power of their voice, or podium, to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium is the intersection of art, culture, and big thoughts wrapped up in good, old-fashioned conversation. Today, I'm thrilled and humbled to share the podium with Shannon Flynn. Shannon is a two-time Emmy Award-winning multi-platform director. She directs both single and multicam shows for a wide variety of networks, including Apple TV, Netflix, HBO and HBO Max, Disney Channel, and Nickelodeon. Having directed more than 300 episodes, including 3 movies and 2 series, Shannon most recently directed a pilot for Apple TV. She's also directed Helpsters, HBO Max's Sesame Street, including episodes from their historic 50th season, and the much-anticipated inaugural season of the Not Too Late Show with Elmo. She helmed the series Betch Sketch for Hulu, Teen Nick, Awesomeness TV, as well as serving as the series director for Boss Cheer and Hotel de Lune on the YouTube channel Brat. Other recent credits include the movies Spring Breakaway, Holiday Spectacular, and Sweet. Shannon received her MFA in directing from the Yale School of Drama. Before we hear from Shannon, I want to invite you to share At the Podium with the people in your lives. If you love what you hear from her today, and I know you will, take a screenshot and share on your Instagram and tag @thepodium_Patrick Huey. Or if you're on Facebook, share our link there. Your shares, likes, and 5-star written reviews help grow our audience and move us up the charts. I am grateful for your support in this capacity. Okay, Shannon, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you, Patrick. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. It's humbling for me to be here with you.
No.
I admired you so much when we were at school, and I know we got to work together, but it was just a huge thrill for me.
We did that beautiful play written by Leslie Kramer called One Dead Soldier. Was that the one play we did together?
Was it? Was that it?
I think that was it. And I remember at that time, you worked from your heart. And I remember really admiring that about the work, that you were not afraid to take your time, to go slow. You created an environment in that rehearsal hall that was very collaborative, where the actors could be heard and brought into the process. And I just had immense respect for you during that, because I thought that's really a daring way to work.
Yeah, I don't know how to work any other way. And it's so funny that you would talk about bold changes and moments, because that particular play was a massive turning point in my time as a director.
Really? I did not know that. Why so?
I, by nature, am a people pleaser. It works for me in a lot of ways because I do allow people to bring everything they have to the table for consideration. And that comes from the heart. That is absolutely a heart-centered move. Like, I want people to be heard. The downside of that is when something is not right, I usually assume that it's my fault. And I remember with Leslie's play, it was a struggle for me because there was just a lot that I didn't understand that I couldn't necessarily articulate. And I remember that Liz Diamond pulled me aside and said, here are some tools for you to use. And it was the first time that I felt like my covers had been pulled and I had been caught.
Oof.
I, like a lot of people, can sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome. And so I was feeling like they're going to find out at Yale that I'm not supposed to be here. They're going to find out at some point that they made a mistake and that she had us all fooled. And that was the play where I felt I had been caught.
It was a hard play.
It was a very hard play. Yes. And without going into it too much, part of it was there was a lot that was confusing about that play that I couldn't wrap my arms around, for which there were no answers. Yeah. So it was like, I love working in the concrete. I love working in the straightforward. And sometimes having something that's a little messy, I couldn't articulate what it was. And then I realized that I had to take ownership of the process. And so that was ultimately what happened. And then I also had to learn how to say no. I had to learn how to say, no, that's not it. It's this. And here's why. Because I knew inherently why something wasn't right. I just couldn't articulate the why. And so Liz taught me how to articulate the why. And that was massive. And that was such a cellular shift in my directing person that I could never look back. Also, that was the year that Stan Wojciechowski said to me that you're afraid to give direction. You're afraid of your actors. You're afraid of telling them what to do. And I was like, that's not true. And it was 100% true. So all of my time at Yale, the biggest lesson I took away was that I was afraid to direct.
Shannon, how is that even possible? Because you had run a very successful theater company before your time at Yale. The name of that company was The Hunger Artists.
That is correct.
So how is it that you were afraid to direct actors?
This is a recurring theme in my life. I expect as a director that the actor know the character better than me. There are a lot of things that I need to look at as a director in terms of the visual landscape of the play or the television show, the film, whatever it is that I'm directing. And my job is to conceive of the overall vision. Within that vision, there are people for whom they have a very specific job. And that is not to say that any one person's job is bigger or smaller than anybody else's. In my mind, it's a very democratic process. We all have a job to do. We are workers among workers. And I still carry that attitude into everything that I do. And sometimes I can have an instinct about something that is right, but I assume if that somebody comes to me with a contradictory idea, if it's a 180 from mine, I just assume theirs is correct because that's their job. And I'll dispense with whatever my idea is. And then I was like, oh, no, wait. Also, I'm supposed to fight for my own ideas. That's really ultimately what it came down to, was that it was the confidence of my own ideas and that they could be correct. Yeah.
Okay, so you've mentioned two people that I think we should clarify for the listener.
Yes. Liz Diamond was a professor in the directing program, in the MFA program at the drama school. And then Stan Wojciechowski was the dean of the drama school and also a director and the artistic director of the Yale Repertory Theater. So that was a huge lesson for me that I learned in my first 3 months. Our play was a few months after that. But.
Yes. I was so excited to talk to you today because you have built such an impressive career as a director in television. And within your work, you really focus on content for a younger audience. You have a track record of working on some of the biggest television shows. You have Hannah Montana, you have Raven's Home, and of course, Sesame Street.
Yes.
I want to know how that journey began and how you made that leap from the Yale story to what you're doing today.
The two are interwoven with each other. My first year at Yale, in our program management class, a director who had graduated from our program came and spoke to our class. Asad Kalata is that person's name. And he had directed some of the most amazing sitcoms that I had ever seen as a teen.
The Facts of Life.
And so Facts of Life, Family Ties. And after class, I spoke to him because I knew I was going to be going back to Los Angeles. And I was like, hey, can we just have coffee? And he said, yes, absolutely. Come up to Los Angeles. We'll grab a cup of coffee. And so I did. And he said to me, have you ever considered directing for television? And I said, without irony, isn't that selling out? Like, if I'm a director of theater, isn't directing television selling out? He laughed so sweetly without judgment and said, well, Shannon, actually, I get to direct a new play every week. I just add cameras.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, oh. So when it was my final year of drama school and I was getting ready to graduate, my husband, Kelly, came with me to New Haven and spent all 3 years there with me. And at the end of that time, I think the presumption is that you're going to move to New York and start your career. And that's what I assumed for myself too. But I knew nothing about New York. I'd never lived in New York. I'd only ever grown up in, Southern California. And we didn't know where to start. You get birthed into the world after 3 years of shelter. And then it's like, what the hell am I supposed to do? So at the end of that time, I was in LA again. And just like a lightning bolt, it occurred to me, I needed to move back to Southern California. And that's what my husband wanted. But he also knew that whatever it is that was going to launch my theater directing career was what he wanted for me. I mean, I just can't say enough about Kelly, but I promise this does have an ending. So, so it occurred to me, we need to move back to Southern California. And one of the things that it came up for me is this conversation with Asad Kalata, who said, you should consider this. And so that's what I just decided. Like, with no research or anything, I was like, I'm moving back to Southern California. I'm going to have a career directing sitcoms. And one person that came into my life, I knew from South Coast Repertory Theater because I had worked there for 5 years before going to school. And that person was Charlotte Schemmel. And she had worked at South Coast Repertory as a theater director. And then she had made a successful transition into television directing. If you believe in symbols and signs, everything was right. So I called Kelly from Southern California and I said, we're moving back to Southern California. He was like, are you nuts? What are you talking about? And I was like, it's right, Kelly. You know it's right. I know it's right. And everything in his voice changed because he was suddenly excited to move back to Southern California. So I shadowed a bunch of directors, and one of those people was Charlotte Schemmel. And from there, I offered to be her assistant for free. I didn't expect to get paid. I was like, I just want to learn from you. And she said, I can't do that. And I said, I'm offering, you're not asking me. The debt that I will owe you is going to be greater than anything that you could pay me. So for 3 years, I followed her around and carried her script and watched her work and command the set in a way that was so similar to the way that I was as a director and that I wanted to grow into. She directed the pilot of That's So Raven, and she directed the pilot of a show called Sweet Life. And then she directed the Hannah Montana pilot, and I was with her there. And that is where the first directing opportunity presented itself. So she helped facilitate me getting an episode of Hannah Montana to direct, and they booked me as the director. Also, coincidentally, I just found out that I was pregnant with my first child. And so,
of course.
And of course. And I literally wrote a note to the universe. I was like, okay, universe, if I am pregnant, then I need to figure this stuff out. You need to show me. And I don't want a symbol and I don't want a butterfly to land on a leaf. I was like, give me some concrete evidence that I'm on the right path. And I was sitting in 2-mile-an-hour traffic on the 405 freeway going north to the Fox lot because she was directing on a sitcom there. And I'm in stop and go traffic with my pad of paper. I don't recommend this, but I was sitting with a pad of paper and a pen writing this down. And that was the day I booked that episode. And then from there, the producers of Hannah Montana asked if I could just come watch the other directors direct. And I was like, yes. And their acting coach, who was a wonderful woman, but could not commit to 5 days a week, they asked me if it was something that I might be interested in. And then I became the acting coach on Hannah Montana. So that like launched me into kids TV. Was not expected. You know, it just was the path that was presented to me, and I stepped on it. And then I stayed on that show for 4 seasons. From there, I worked on a show for Nick Jr., and that led me to Sesame Street. It's just been the thing that's been put in front of me, which is not to say it's the only thing I've done, but really that was just the path that was put in front of me. And every time it just kept getting reinforced and reinforced. That's how it came to be.
Shannon, so much of this show is about walking through those doors that open.
Yes.
Because oftentimes we have an idea in our mind of what our life is going to look like and be. And then a door opens and you're on a whole new path. I love that you had the awareness and you were in touch enough with yourself to understand that, yes, we were all supposed to graduate from Yale and go to New York and have theatrical careers, but something in that did not resonate for you, but something in LA did. I want to talk to you about part of your career is you've been on these shows, Hannah Montana, Raven's House, That's So Raven. How do you work with a child who is at that level of success? Because they are still children.
Yes, that's true.
I would imagine part of the job is helping them navigate the extreme fame that they're dealing with and how to put that to the side and focus on the work, and also creating a safe environment for them. Can you talk about how you work with those very special children in these really unusual circumstances?
Yes. I mean, the simplest answer is I treat them like human beings, and I don't talk down to them. Also, I don't put them on a pedestal either. The best example is Miley. So Miley and I worked together for 4 seasons on Hannah Montana. Being a part of a person's life and watching them from the time that they're 12 until they're 17, to have a person blossom is crazy cakes. And then watching the success of the show, her dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, was on that show playing her dad, and Emily Osment was on that show, and Mitchell Musso and Jason Earls. And it was a really special experience. And you were talking about creating a safe environment. And I think one of the things that my hope is that I create for any artist is a place to just be and be expressive, no matter what the circumstances. I wasn't solely responsible for that environment, but as a director, even in a rehearsal room, it's like we have to be able to be messy, and we have to be able to, we don't always have to be the best version of ourselves, right? And that includes myself. I think one of the hardest things to say is I don't know. It goes back to my own experience of wanting to people please. And I think sometimes that kids think that they aren't allowed to ask the questions that they need to ask to get the answers that they want, because there's an expectation that they should just already know. So I do workshops for Disney Channel before they launch a series, like sometimes. And the best piece of advice I give them is just ask. If you don't want to know what the camera does, or you want to know what different lenses do, don't be afraid to ask. Ask. Also, nobody expects you to know the answers because you're 12. Right. There are seasoned veterans in this business who might know the answer, but at your sweet age, nobody expects you to know the answer. Nobody wants you to be afraid to ask the things you need to ask, especially if it's going to be helpful to everybody else. And so working with those kids, I try to just give them permission to just be curious. And don't forget that you're a kid. Also, don't forget that there are people that have expectations about you that you may not be ready for, a maturity that you just don't have, or that this is a job. Everybody's showing up for a job, and this is your job now. Being a kid actor is not easy. Being a kid actor requires a lot of attention and focus and organizational skills that you may not have, but it is a job, and it looks fun, But the reality of it is so the opposite of what is, I think, what people think it's going to be. And then the other thing too is if you're growing up in that, people expect you to be your character.
Mm.
People expect you to be the person that they see on TV. You know, you're allowed to have bad days, but people's expectations of you are so much greater. So the more I can prepare them, and some of it goes over their head and some of it they can't know. The best I can do is just tell them, and then they experience it. And then hopefully they have some kind of semblance of memory of it. The other thing that I give them is the Wesley Fada, who is the movement teacher at Yale. The other big takeaway from Yale was learning champions adjust. And I cannot tell you how many times I use that in a day. You know, it's like pivot. So if people say, Shannon, we have to flip our day, people are going to throw stuff at you all day long. Champions adjust. Be a champion. Just take it, move on, pivot your world. So thank you, Wesley Fada, for teaching me that. Just those 2 words can change everything.
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned Wesley because he's come up quite a bit as we've spoken to people who've gone to Yale. And the one of the main things that I took away from that school was champions adjust. And I think about that all the time. I wanted to talk to you about Sesame Street.
Okay.
Which has been in the news recently because of the Big Bird situation.
Mm-hmm.
But that must have presented a very unique directing challenge for you because you're dealing with kids and puppets and puppeteers and cast members who are producers and cast members who've been on the show since its inception. How do you and how did you navigate all of those dynamics?
Sesame Street is a really special place, as I'm sure you can imagine. And as a child growing up watching Sesame Street, to work on something that is so iconic and is so a part of the cultural hive mind. I had worked with puppets before I worked on Sesame Street, which is part of the reason why I was invited to direct on the show.
Mm.
I flew myself out to New York to get familiar and acclimated and also get over the shock and awe of being on the stoop of 1-2-3 on Sesame Street. Walking on that set is, and I've seen it now that I've been there for a few years, I've seen it happen to other people because if you had any childhood relationship to Sesame Street, there is a very childlike reaction to walking onto that set.
Right.
I suspect I would have had the same reaction if I walked onto Mr. Rogers. You know what I mean? There's just this kind of, oh my God, it's smaller than I thought, or it's bigger than I thought, or it's, there's the stoop, or there's Hooper's store, or that's where Stevie Wonder sang.
Oh, yeah.
There's Big Bird's Nest. It is magic. And I didn't know what to expect in terms of cast and crew. So being able to just go there and take all of that in before I had to step on as the director was one of the key pre-game decisions that I made. And I got to see how everybody interacted with each other. It was actually the way that Sesame Street is filmed is different from what I normally do. Normally on a sitcom, there's 4 cameras, and on Sesame Street, we shoot it like a live show. So I have to know which camera I'm going to cut to. And part of the reason for that is for the puppeteers, because the puppeteers are watching what we call the line cut, which is what camera is live. So what camera is shooting, so that they can play to that camera. So their puppet can play to that camera. That was like a new skill that I had to learn right away. The people at Sesame Street are dedicated to the mission of Sesame Street, but there's no woo-woos there. It's like everybody is real. The energy there is wonderful and joyful, but people have bad days. That's it. It's just a real place. To answer your question, there was somebody on the show that I was working with, my associate director, Emily, and I said to her, I'm terrified. I don't know how to direct this way. I've never directed this way. I don't know. I'm so scared. I'm scared that I'm going to mess it up. And she said, Shannon, you can't break Sesame Street. I'm sorry, but it's been around way too long for one person to come in and mess it up. So I was like, oh my God. And the second part of that was that she said to me, nobody here is going to let you fail.
Wow.
And I was just like, I just absorbed that and really believed her. Having a certain humility to the process too, right? Like, I'm not going to come in and be like, this is the way we're doing things. I want to bring my creativity and my ideas and what I think is funny and honor their process, but also not feel afraid of their process like it wasn't something that I could do, which is ultimately what happened. So hilariously, my very first day of shooting, and there's a puppet captain. So when there are tricky puppet situations, there's somebody there who knows. And so long as I was willing to learn and listen and be humble, that was probably the most important thing that I could bring to the table, was just a humility of, I don't know this, but my expectation is that you're going to help me. And if you can help me, then we can collaborate together and make a great show. And on my very first day of shooting, the first puppet that so funny to say, my first day of shooting, I shot Cookie Monster. But my very first scene on my very first day of Sesame Street was a scene with Cookie Monster. And there was just a rhythm to a joke. And David Rudman, who plays Cookie Monster, is spectacular, so amazing. And you have to remember is that they're just actors who need a director, which is not to say that they don't know better. So this goes back to not being afraid to give direction.
Yeah.
Reincorporation. Yeah. Here we go. And I was like, hey, David, when I read this is the rhythm that I heard. I may not be right about that, but if you could play it that way one time so that I could hear it, just to hear whether or not that's right. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so he did it. And he was like, oh, yeah, you're right. That is right. My first week there just went spectacularly. And it had been a rough couple of years, to the point when I was directing there that I didn't know if I was going to continue as a director for a lot of reasons. And so it was really affirming I was at that moment again where I was like, okay, universe, what am I supposed to do? Do I go back to waiting tables?
Wow.
Do I become a Lyft driver? Do I deliver for Postmates? What do I do? Do I get an office job? And then this happened. And then that was the answer that I got back.
Sesame Street is an affirmative answer. Where does that come from, your ability to be open to what the universe is giving you? Because lots of people can't do that. Lots of people want to control it, shape it, drive it. But there is a great strength in being able to say, okay, tell me where I need to go next. Where did that come from in you?
Yeah, I think I can lay it mostly at the feet of two things. One is I've been in recovery for a number of years from alcoholism and drug addiction. And so there's a humility there of surrender to whatever is next and just trusting the process. And then more specifically in the midst of all of that, there's a book that I did in the 90s called The Artist's Way, which is by Julia Cameron. And that opened my mind to synchronicity. When you give a name to the thing that you want, suddenly you see that everywhere. It's so if you say, I think I really want X, Y, or Z, and you place no expectations on it, suddenly you're open to whatever it is that comes your way if you're not so specific about it. I didn't know Sesame Street wasn't even on my radar, but I just said yes to other projects, and then saying yes to that other project brought that to me. Yeah. I had no clue, but it was based on another show that I had done, and it was showed with puppets and the puppeteers, and I just learned from those puppeteers. They taught me so much. Sometimes you need to look backwards in order to move forward. When you realize the breadth of your experience is based on all of the other experiences that you have that set you up for the next thing.
Right.
I had comedy experience and I had multicam experience, and then suddenly I had puppetry experience. I wouldn't have been able to do what I did had I not had those other things that I just said yes to. Those are the two biggies for me that make me open-minded to whatever is going to come. And I just have to trust that. There's nothing else in the world that I want to do except be a director. But I was willing, if that wasn't what it was supposed to be anymore, then show me what the next thing is. if it's not supposed to be that, then I guess it's supposed to be something better or different, you know?
That's a really courageous way to live, because oftentimes people get so married to ideas of what is supposed to be. And I'm supposed to have 3 kids, and I'm supposed to live in this neighborhood, and I'm supposed to have this job. And as you and I both know,
look at where we are.
Look at where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Who in your life, in your career, your life, had the greatest impact on you?
I think there's a lot of people, which sounds like a wishy-washy answer. But my husband is a huge part of me being able to sit where I am right now. We've been together for a long ass time now. I've known him since I was 19. And, he has never given up on me, not once.
Wow.
And like, even now, I still have imposter syndrome. It's getting better, but I still have it. I still think that I'm not good enough. I still think people are making a mistake when they hire me. It doesn't last as long as it used to, but there's still that initial, like, are you sure? And, the other day I was melting down about something, and Kelly just gets this look on his face. And I was like, are you ever tired of just hearing me say the same bullshit over and over and over again? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, I just don't know what it's going to take, Shannon. What's it going to take? What's it going to take? Clearly, outside reinforcement doesn't solve this. So it's got to come from within you. And I don't know what it's going to take to like make you recognize and realize that you are right where you're supposed to be.
Oof.
Thank you, Kelly Flynn. But I know it's frustrating for him. So I love you, Kelly. Sorry.
Kelly is
like, I apologize all
person.
the time. I'm like, I'm sorry I'm such a pain in the ass. But yeah, but I mean it.
What are you excited about for the future?
Career-wise, there are things that I haven't done that I yearn to do.
Like what?
And like directing a movie. I've directed a short movie. I've directed, a couple of movies that were on YouTube and stuff like that. But like, what I realize is that when I'm watching movies, like, and this is something I will say that was, if you had asked me 10 years ago if I wanted to direct a movie, I probably would have said no. But again, you can look at it 2 ways. Either the road narrows or it widens up, right? Like it's one or the other. So like, I spent a long time wanting to try and there's a difference in television, as you know, between like single camera and multicam. Multicam sitcoms are like Friends or soap operas or Sesame Street. And then single camera is, Modern Family or Arrested Development or directing a movie, right? Or 1 hour episodics. And as I've watched movies, there was one movie in particular, which was Little Miss Sunshine, that made me realize, oh, here is a beautifully told story that just unfolds, and it's actor driven and it's story driven. And it's not like complicated, by which I mean, like, I call them the fancy. It's just a solidly, beautifully told story. And I was like, I want to tell a story like that. Those are the kind of stories that I want to tell, like something that's funny and poignant and stuff like that. And so, but I didn't think I was something I would be able to do. And then now I realize, yeah, that's something I absolutely 100% am trying to pursue. Something I know I could do. So now I just have to put it out there. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but like, I didn't know how anything was going to happen. Like, how the hell did I know 20 years ago that I would be like sitting in New York directing a television show for Apple.
Right.
I could not have conceived. So I know it'll happen. I just don't know what it will look like or how, but I know it will because those ideas don't come from nowhere. It's something when you're ready for it. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
I love it. Shannon, I cannot thank you enough for your time today and your willingness to share your wisdom and your voice. I'm just so proud of the work that you've done, and it's been amazing to watch. So congratulations. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice, so use yours wisely. Thanks, everyone.